Take me out to the ball game.
And now, Twitch It Dolphin Media presents The Joys of Mudville, a look at the current state of baseball. Now here are your hosts, Scott McIntyre, Andy Tom Chesson, and James Christopher.
So we are back here on The Joys of Mudville. It has been a minute, but it's kind of cool that we're coming back because A, the Super Regionals are going to start in a couple of days, and B, and probably most cool for the show, is all three teams are alive. And what I find interesting is when we did our college baseball preview, two of us thought we'd be alive. One of us wanted a good season. And it turns out the one of us who wanted the good season is probably the best positioned to make a run. So I don't know. We'll start with the Aggies. Andy, what are your just overall broad strokes before we dive into it?
Are we talking about the season to date or what's going to happen in the next week or two?
You see what I mean, Scott? Andy sometimes has more confidence. Like when the Longhorns were dropping games, he had way more confidence in them than I do.
Yeah.
Still, and now, no, I think
A&M's a flawed team. To answer your question, we don't have a pitching staff that's World Series credible. That's not to say we can't get there because we sure do hit the ball really well. And we sure do hit the ball really well 1 through 9 in the lineup. And I think one of the big changes that Schlossnagle's made to our roster and our approach, along with Michael Early, from an offensive standpoint, is they work really deep into counts. They don't swing at breaking balls when they can help it. They wait for the pitch they can hit. Downside of that is you get to listen to Todd Walker complain that the game took 5 hours to play 9 innings. Well, you know what? Sorry, but that's what this team has to do to win right now is be really selective at the plate. And I think you'll see with the level of recruiting they're doing on a go-forward basis, the offensive approach will look a lot more like what TCU has looked like over the past several years, very aggressive on the base pass. But right now, we are a team that hits a lot, gets a lot of men on base, and scores a lot of runs. And that's if we're going to advance against Louisville, who looks exactly like that, we're going to have to just outscore them. So I expect a lot of 10-9, 14-13 type games.
that 15-11 game, I really can't believe I fell asleep during it because I was doing my best to stay awake. But it does look like
9.
15. Sorry, whoa!
Chicken feed, boys. Chicken feed compared to that Stillwater regional. The 15-9.
Yeah, no kidding. 29-13. But
29-15, Oklahoma State over Missouri State. You are correct. Yeah.
Before we jump on to the Razorbacks, though, I will point out that A&M is a slight favorite over Louisville for those of you who care about such things. I think I'm reading this right.
Yeah, we are a slight favorite, and I think that comes down to playing the games at Bluebell Park. These teams are really I haven't watched a lot of Louisville. They're really, really evenly matched. Neither team has great pitching, as witnessed by Louisville's regional closing out with Michigan, and that was kind of a barn burner. Both teams can hit really well. If I'm giving A&M an edge, and I know that the Big 12 guy sitting on my panel here is going to cringe at this, the ACC is not as strong a baseball conference as what the A&M Aggies have had to play through all season going through the SEC gauntlet. So if there's an edge, I think it's that. I think we've faced a little bit better competition than Louisville has, and we're at home. So having said that, you could flip a coin and neither result's going to surprise me.
I would also say that getting out of the College Station regional was pretty tough. I mean, Louisiana, it was not exactly a walkover of a team. Jim and you and I had the opportunity to see them early on in February there at Round Rock.
Yeah, even Oral Roberts won a couple big games against first quadrant opponents this season, so they were not an easy four. And TCU's always got a good team, so I mean it was a difficult regional, but we survived it.
Well, let's move to
probably the toughest regional. ORU's always in the postseason.
I can't. So let me just show you how ignorant I am in betting. So Andy, I'll read you the stats for Arkansas at North Carolina, and you tell me who the favorite is because I don't really. So it says North Carolina -120, Arkansas -110. It's usually minus or a plus, right?
Are you having operator? The last I saw that Arkansas was 15-1 to win the World Series, which means they have them winning their regional. Baseball odds don't ever make sense to me. I know there's something that you can look at and see those hundreds. Yeah. And the first 100 doesn't matter. I know that.
Yeah, the minus 120 means if
Yeah,
I've just never seen I've never seen a line in baseball where both teams had a minus number. Usually it's a minus and a plus.
Yeah, if I'm going to ask anybody here, I'm going to ask the degenerates in Missouri, Arkansas.
Well, it's not very often that you see two teams that are both, under, but I think that goes to show just what an incredibly even super regional Arkansas at North Carolina is slated to be, and for big reason because it's at North Carolina. That's
right.
For sure.
Where are you sitting with the Razorbacks? Where are you sitting with, how, just what do you think some of the strengths of them going in to this matchup in Chapel Hill is going to be?
Yeah. So the problem with the Razorbacks has been this year. The problem has been timely hitting.
Hey, Scott, we're talking about the Razorbacks, not the Houston. Sorry. I just had a,
yeah, sorry.
Real
timely hit. Yeah. Timely hitting has been one thing. A lot of the big names that the Razorbacks have relied upon the last year or two aren't having good years. Robert Moore, whose dad's the GM of Kansas City, is having statistically an incredibly down year. What Arkansas does bring is an exceptional infield defense and a pretty good outfield defense that wasn't always on display in the wet turf and the weird turf at Oklahoma State, but in the Stillwater Regional. Arkansas lost their ace pitcher. Their Friday night pitcher was gone before the beginning of the year, Peyton Pallette. And they've kind of had to piecemeal things together. I think they still have a good, not a great number one starter in former quarterback Connor Noland. After that, things get kind of dicey because they went with a freshman lefty for a lot of the year in the two spot, but he always wasn't that great. And as is the case often with third day starters, you kind of don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
North Carolina, on the other hand, has a really good first starter, but he pitches to contact. I think that could bite him because I think the Razorbacks are really good in hit and run situations, and if they try not to just play long ball the whole game.
Most of my dating life was a hit and run situation.
Yeah, and you did try to play the long ball game. Let's be honest. I don't get drums for that, Andy. That's fine. The number two starter for North Carolina, though, is more of a strikeout pitcher, and then they really go pitcher by committee. And I think at this time of year, it takes one bad start, especially if it's the first game bad start, to kind of throw everything else.
Yeah.
You throw the baby out with the bathwater, and let's just who's there. Coach Dave Van Horn, before Arkansas played the final game with with Oklahoma State in the Stillwater Regional. And I cannot express to people, it was 14-10 the night before in extra innings. Oklahoma State beat Missouri State 29-15 in a game that Missouri State was winning 12-0. And then they did a yawner the final night. It was 7-3. But leading into that final game, Dave Van Horn, coach for Arkansas, just asked his guys, hey, every pitcher, send me a text. Let me know what you got in the tank. If you got nothing, that's fine. If you got a little, that's fine. Let me know what you got. And the questionable lefty freshman I was telling you about actually closed out the game the last three innings, and his response to the coach was, "Arm feels great. I'll give you everything. I'm ready to go, 100% ready to go." So it's really luck at this time of year. I do think Arkansas will win the Super Regional over North Carolina, and I think North Carolina is an exceptionally good team. But I do think the story of the year is Mr. Tom Chesson.
Andy,
A&M's not supposed to be here.
You wanted to say something?
No, I'm waving at people. I like seeing people. It's great.
The elephant in the room is I don't know why it's an elephant in the room. It's always weird when I ask myself questions about the Texas Longhorns, but here we go. I'm going to do it.
Texas, Alabama.
You want us to ask you questions? We can ask you.
Well, I mean, we will eventually, but I want to give my similar breakdown to what you guys did, what the season was like. But, Longhorns are favorites going to East Carolina. I do think that is an advantage for them right now. But, it's interesting. It's been an interesting season because, Scott, you talked about most teams don't go three starters deep that you can really rely on. And for the beginning of the season, Texas did that. They were the number one team in the country. And I think partly because they did have three nail starters for the weekend, all of whom could have been a Friday starter. Yeah. What was bizarre to me and what, I talked to Andy about really throughout the season was losing one guy, the entire team seemed to forget how to pitch. And I don't know what I expect out of this. I've gone from expecting to make Omaha on that very sort of cocky, brash Texas Longhorn thing to, boy, it would just be neat to at least get there.
What's he talking about, Andy?
I love the fact that I am the only one. I am the only one on this show who ever openly admits the flaws with their own fan base. And so,
dude, I can.
You two can suck it.
Hang on a minute. Let me
you
tell you
two can
something.
suck
Arkansas
it.
fan base is the Arkansas Razorback fan base is the most delusional fan base known to man. I love us. But man, let me tell you, we lose an 8-7 game in 12 innings, and suddenly everything's falling apart. We're never going to win another game ever.
Again, we're not talking about the Astros Twitter today. Oh, but anyway, back to what I was saying is I think they got some mojo. They did win all of the regional relatively easily, including against Air Force Academy, who actually beat the crap out of them earlier in the season. I do want to do another shout out to what happened at the Dish. I think those of you saw the clips, it was bigger than baseball. As somebody who served and understands what those guys are going to go up against, I thought everything that both schools did for each other after that, from the USA chants to the handshakes to Air Force out for the eyes of Texas, I thought it was really a nice, bigger than baseball moment. So, but yeah, I think that's proof. If you look at what all these three teams are, is how weird baseball can be. Andy, I'll give you the first sort of broad strokes response to that comment.
I've been telling you all year that they would put it together because there's too much talent for them not to play well. They didn't in the middle of the year. The thing I've noticed about the Longhorn fan base, and not casting any stones, really easily get down on David Pierce. And I don't really understand why, because outside of his first season when he didn't have a roster, he's made it to the College World Series. He's likely going to make it to the College World Series again. I don't know. I mean, short of winning the whole thing, which, yes, I realize that's the expectation at a school like the University of Texas. It should be the expectation of everybody that competes, that this is what you want to do. But I think Texas is one of the few that are uniquely positioned to really, really expect to be there every year. And, the fact that you guys have been there 37, 38 times says that. I mean, it's part of the tradition. And we've said before, the way you guys look at your football team is the way you should look at your baseball team, because that's the dynasty. But there's too much talent. Yes, you lost your Friday night starter, but it took a while. You had the middle of the season doldrums. And I think in college baseball, especially when you can get away with it, it's hard to maintain that intensity. So Pierce has an issue. It's getting his team to maintain the intensity throughout the course of the season. But when you get his bunch in a playoff atmosphere, in a bracketed tournament, he's going to do well. And he's proven that through his career at Tulane, at Sam Houston, and at Texas. So I don't have a whole lot of concern about you guys beating East Carolina this weekend. The only thing that I would say is that just looking at the record, you appear to play much better at home than you do on the road. And because you're going on the road, that's probably the thing that I think might be in East Carolina's favor. And East Carolina's got a good team. I just think Texas, if they put it all together this weekend, is at another level than East Carolina is.
So you're saying Braves Emily won't ruin 2 consecutive baseball seasons for me?
I doubt seriously that's going to happen.
Good. Scott, overall, I think it's been an exciting baseball season at the college level. And I think what's been kind of fun to watch is because of the late start with MLB, there were a lot of people who I think peeked in on it and checked it out a little bit and thought they would give up on it, and they didn't. And I've seen lots of people that were like, I guess I'll just randomly pick a team and then really just stay invested in the whole sport.
No, it's a great point. I think that college baseball has had a huge resurgence this year. It's on TV more often. It's getting more, more press, if you will. I think a lot of that coverage is. I think a lot of the coverage is growing. I think a lot of it also is because of, with reduced rounds in the MLB draft, with a reduction of minor league teams, colleges really are going to serve more of a feeder system than they ever have in the past. We've already seen it with collegiate wood bat leagues, and the scouts that go out there, and in the partnerships that MLB has with some of the independent leagues as well. The dynamic has changed, and I think the impetus to all that was the reduction of the minor leagues, and kind of and the reduction of the rounds of the draft. It's kind of forcing kids to make a harder choice. Whereas in the past they've had to make a choice. Okay, I'm the 32nd round draft pick of this club, or I can go play baseball here. Now you're not the 32nd round. You're either a free agent and you're fending it off with everybody else, or you can go play college and get an education. The college route's becoming a lot more attractive whenever it comes to baseball. But I got to throw this in really quick because Andy was touching on some of this. I'm going to go with, here's the teams that I think make it to Omaha. I think Arkansas.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Are we getting there? Oh, no.
Yeah. We got to navigate.
I'm trying to make sure I don't fall behind.
Now it's Andy's time to broad stroke the season before we do one thing, and then
Last time you told him to broad stroke something,
I am not broad stroking anything on camera. It's not happening. I saw what happened.
Andy, our show is dying. We're turning this into OnlyFans. Get with the program.
No, I wanted to make a point that to what Scott had just said. I was Saturday night. We were watching the A&M game on ESPN Plus because that's what you do. We were playing chicken foot, and we were with a couple. One was an SFA grad. The other one actually went to A&M. Didn't pay much attention to the baseball team while she was there. And we caught them a few times as we were playing dominoes, turning around and watching. There's so much more action that happens in a college game than happens in your typical MLB game. That it's, to that point it was distracting, but the ball is put in play more because the pitching is not quite at the level it is in the major leagues, which is understandable. These are 18 to 20-year-old guys. But it's so much more fun and so much more easy to be engaged in a college game because there is so much more traffic on the base pass. There's so much more adventure every time a ball's hit into the infield. I think that ESPN doesn't understand what they have as a product. Now, I'm not advocating that they need to put all 32 games on a Friday night and during the regional round on some sort of broadcast network because that's not realistic. But I think during the season, they need to continue to put that product out when people would be available to watch it. And I'm hoping they're going to get there because I think this season proved that you could have ratings and have people interested.
Especially come April when March Madness is over, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I do think, to your point, Andy, I think if it plays a lot like the MLB that we used to watch growing up plays, where it was still about contact and moving runners and all that stuff. And I agree. I think, I know that people got a little down on Augie when he was here because he'd bunt anybody if somebody got on, but he'd have Ivan Melendez squaring away. But all right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to sign Scott. I'm going to give you Texas at Carolina. I'm going to do A&M. And then Andy, you'll do Arkansas at North Carolina. Give me one reason why Arkansas, Andy, comes out of that tournament.
Simply, and I've said it before because it's the same issue that A&M is going to have. Arkansas is a better team top to bottom than North Carolina is. And going through the SEC gauntlet is going to make playing North Carolina feel like playing a Tuesday night game. Bold? Probably, but I'm there.
Okay.
North Carolina has some scary individuals though in that lineup for sure.
You cannot talk about the waitresses at Perkins. That's not fair. They're not here to defend themselves.
I got to tell you something. I've met a couple of waitresses at Perkins. I forgot, it's a family show. I'll tell you guys later.
Okay, so Scott, why is Texas going to beat Eastern Carolina?
I think Texas can beat East Carolina for much of the same reason. Very strong pitching. East Carolina they haven't faced what you guys have faced in the Big 12. Texas played a strong non-conference schedule, all things
including
considered.
Beating Tennessee. Huh?
Yeah, one of the 7 losses that Tennessee has. Look, anything can happen this year. Excuse me, as Andy pointed out, East Carolina is a good team, right? They're ranked higher than Texas. They're 8-9 right now. But Texas was there at the top of the standings for a lot of this year. They hit a hiccup, like you point out, Jim. You lose one pitcher, and everybody kind of has to reset what they're doing. But I think I'm just impressed by Texas core. I'm impressed by the defense. Your third baseman, your corner guys are just incredibly strong. I do think that game will go 3 series. I don't think anybody gets out of East Carolina without a loss, but I do think Texas has just been there, done that a little bit more than East Carolina this year.
And I think the reason why A&M wins, I saw something when I was watching the game, and it was, as you know, if you watched it, it was back and forth in chunks. Like no lead felt safe, but
it was 3-0, then it was 7-3, then it was 7-7, and then the rest of the runs were scored in the last 2 innings.
Yeah, the fact that the A&M dugout looked focused, not stressed. I didn't think they looked concerned, and I'll give ups to the 12th man. I think all of that, and I'm a big Hart guy, and I think Hart is going to get you the extra base. Hart will maybe you'll run through and it's an infield single. I really think A&M realizes they're maybe not supposed to be there, and here's an opportunity to make a statement, and I think they will. I do think that they will go to Omaha. I actually think all 3 of our squads will be in Omaha, so we can move on that. But let's look at the other. Let's just go real quick. The other ones, still want to talk a little Joe Maddon. All right, Ole Miss at Southern Miss. Scott, who do you got?
Going with Southern Miss. Ole Miss has a great team year in, year out, but I just don't think they have the complete team this year that they've had in years past.
Scott? I'm sorry, Andy?
I'm also Scott.
I'll say it again.
I think that is going to be possibly the most entertaining. If you like emotional baseball, if you like heated baseball, Southern Mississippi Ole Miss is going to be scary from that standpoint. And I think Southern Miss is going to pull it out. Ole Miss has not been consistent this year. I agree they should win. I just think Southern Miss is going to pull one out.
The only thing Ole Miss is consistent with is those putrid light blue uniforms, and those are putrid.
That and talking random smack on the infield.
UConn at number 2, Stanford, also known as the Fighting AJ Hinches. Stanford looks like to be a big favorite, and they're who I'm taking. Andy?
Stanford did not deserve to make it out of their regional. They did, but it was by the skin of their teeth. I'm going to pick the underdog again. I don't see Stanford putting it together.
So you're going with the Fighting George Springers? I
am.
Do you think those guys they have to have some kind of a bet, right? Like, I think they're still pretty close.
I mean, you would think.
Yeah.
I would think that at some point, Hinch is going to be managing somewhere else. Who knows? He has to keep good relations open everywhere.
That's right. And Scott, what about you?
I think that UConn very quietly put together a very good team this year. Nobody thinks about Northern teams being that great. Here's Notre Dame, Michigan, and UConn, and 2 of those 3 are in super regionals. I don't think UConn beats Stanford. Yes, Stanford was fortunate to get out of their regional, but come on, UConn beat Maryland to get there. Yeah, no disrespect to Maryland, but that ain't a powerhouse. Andy can put his finger in front of the thing if he wants to, but I think that I think that UConn.
Don't tell Tom Herman that Maryland's not a powerhouse.
Shut up.
I'm just talking baseball.
Andy chose violence today. I'm so happy.
You really did. Did. No, I think UConn's going to make a trip out west and get a whole hard slap of wake up.
I think so too. All right, Virginia Tech is going to host OU. I think Virginia Tech. I'm going to go with the favorite. They're rather large favorites in it too. Andy, how about you?
This is a tough one because I don't think there is a hotter team in baseball than Oklahoma right now. And there's a lot to be said for talent and roster and belief and all that stuff, but sometimes just teams play really well at the right time. Witness the Washington Nationals in 2019.
Or the Atlanta Braves.
The Atlanta Braves last year. Inferior teams that play above their heads at the right time. Having said that, I think Virginia Tech wins this one. At some point, that magic runs out for Oklahoma.
I don't think it runs out to Omaha. I just don't. I think OU makes it to Omaha. I think when you go to Florida
Sure.
in May and you win a regional, and I don't care whether it's 1973 or 2033, when you beat Florida in a regional they're hosting, you're for real. And I think Oklahoma is hot. I think they fought through some injuries and some team gelling together through the first part of the year, but they are there. I think they're the best one of the two best unranked teams, and I do think they'll make it to Omaha.
All right, so the next two will go real quick because I still want to talk a little Joe Maddon before we get out of here. All right, Auburn, number 14 at Oregon State. I'm going to take Oregon State. Scott?
Yeah, I got to go with Oregon State too. I think Oregon State has very quietly over the last decade or so just built an absolute baseball powerhouse in Corvallis. Auburn's good, but Oregon's, but they're still new to it compared to what Oregon State's doing. It's tough to win there. Oregon State.
Andy?
I'm same with Oregon State, and that means that we're all going to get pictures of Braves Ashland crying in her beer, which is differently than drinking in her beer. So I mean, it's whatever.
We're fighting with mansplained baseball. Last one. I'm going to actually take Notre Dame to upset number 1 Tennessee because there is a little fighting Irish fan inside of me. Andy?
No, Tennessee. No.
How far is he?
Yeah, I don't want to talk.
How deep is that fighting Irish fan inside of you? And when did this happen?
Not to derail, you haven't watched the first episode of The Boys season 3 yet, have you?
I've not watched a single second of The Boys, despite the fact that Mike Donis is in it, and I just tell him I love it. Yeah, well, the termite has a special appearance in the first episode. That's all I'm going to say about a little man being inside you. Tennessee's too good. Tennessee's way too good. They are arrogant and brash and cocky, and they resemble their manager, and they are going to be the team you hate when you watch them. But they are really, really, really good top to bottom. Scott?
Yeah, you got to be incredibly arrogant for me to pull for Notre Dame. Seriously, I've got to dislike you a lot for me to pull for Notre Dame at any point in time. Boy, I hope Notre Dame wins that super regional. Andy
it does change things for everybody, doesn't it? If you knock off number 1.
Joe Vitiello is a great coach at Tennessee. He's a great coach. He used to be an assistant under Dave Van Horn at Arkansas. He learned a lot of baseball for him, but their personalities are different. He did not learn Mr. Van Horn's personality. That said, Tennessee's going to win that. They're going to win that super regional. I don't see Notre Dame winning a game.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, I hope they do. Man, I've never wanted to be so wrong because nothing would be tastier than the salty tears of Tennessee fans to me right now. But
well, as we wrap up, let's move to the MLB real quick. And we've actually seen something this season that we haven't seen a lot of it really in recent years. And that's now already 2 mid-season managerial changes. The Joe Girardi thing is whatever. The Joe Maddon thing is so weird to me because the Angels actually were playing well. Yes, they are currently in the midst of a 13-game losing streak, which ties their longest in history because they lost, but not in the same season. Like they broke the next thing. But Andy, start with you, man, because it's going to affect, I think what the Astros are doing in the West. Just overall, like, what was your reaction to the firing? And just,
I mean, like everything else the Angels have been doing for the last 14 days, I laughed a lot. It comes down to the fact that he is 130 and 148 as the Angels manager. He has had a bad time, and I think he took the wrong job. I don't think it makes him a bad manager. He's proven in other stops that he's not a bad manager, but like everybody else, you're as good as the talent that you have to some extent. And that's where I think this failed him. The Angels are still Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout when he's healthy. And
by the way, Mike Trout did go out with a groin injury yesterday.
Yeah, and whatever else they have. I know everybody was, with Tyler Ward. He's on fire. He's the best player in the world. He's hitting 217 now. Their team has regressed back to the mean. This losing streak, while it is long and nobody loses, I don't think most teams are bad enough to lose 12 games in a row. It takes a little luck to get that bad. It's not an accident that they've lost this many games so close together. Ohtani is batting 217, I think I saw.
And an ERA near 4.
ERA, in the 4s. So he's not having the season he had last year. Rendon is not the player that he was with the Nationals. So it's surprising that they didn't give him enough time. But I also was reading something this morning where Maddon was talking about the conflict between the analytical side of the front office and the players' side of the front office, and how only true baseball people should be able to disseminate the analytical information. So I think there was, more than just the record going on.
So we won't look for him to replace Dusty, and not that I would want him. Scott, I mean, you actually had kind of we joke with you about it, but you picked the Angels. You thought Joe Maddon would be the difference maker. Just your overall impression.
Let me put my Joe Maddon glasses on, take off the clear ones and put on the dark ones so I can now officially.
Can you play Wild Thing?
Talk about Joe Maddon.
Yeah, right.
No, I thought Maddon was a great fit. Here's the difference. Angels changed GMs. The new GM, Joe Maddon's not his guy. You lose 12 games. This isn't my guy anyway. He's griping about this part where, baseball guys versus non-baseball guys, analytics. You know what? I got an idea, guys. He can't win a game. He's obviously lost a clubhouse. He's got a losing record. Let me bring my guy in. Phil Nevin's been a guy that when you're interim and you're going to be interim for 100 games, it's an audition.
It's an interview. Yeah.
It's absolutely. It's a 6-month interview. And people have been clamoring for Nevin to really get a chance. Well, hey, dude, the team proved in April how good they are. So, okay, Phil, here's your chance. And if it works out, then the new GM and Phil Nevin look like geniuses. If it doesn't work out, you can blame it on Joe Maddon and get a restart. That's really what all this comes down to. They just felt like he wasn't a good fit. But Joe Maddon just suddenly didn't forget all of his knowledge about baseball. He still knows what he's doing.
I think the Angels front office overbought on that first month of the season. I really think that this is what it's going to look like all the time. You have a team. Every team plays well for a few weeks in the season. The good teams play well for longer. And I think they had their good streak in April. And there's just not a lot to that roster that makes you think, it's just, you look at the Astros, and I know this is not the Astros program, but if you look at the Astros and you go, okay, the offense is struggling, but they've got 7 guys in this lineup who have proven they can hit in the major leagues. You go to the Angels and you go, well, they got 2, and Rendon used to be able to hit, and that's it. You got guys who will have a good week here and a good week there, and they're really convinced that they have most of the pieces, and I just don't see that they do. And
they're an 85 win team, maybe a 90 win team. They're not a 100 win team I mean, that's where they can get to. I do think you're right, Andy. It was overbought, and I think part of that is also living in LA and not having a winner for the last few years, while watching these guys across town with their $325 million budget or whatever it's exploding to this week. We're watching that with them blow up. And wow, hey, we were leading the division. Both LA teams and both New York teams were leading the division for a while. This is great. And then suddenly we're falling off. Well, we're going to fire the manager, but no manager gets fired at the end of May, at the 1st of June, unless there are other contributing factors taking place inside the front office. And Andy nailed it. And we're going to see it a lot more. It's the older baseball guys versus the younger, not knuckleheads, but
nerds,
geeks.
Geeks.
The nerds, the non
called nerds,
the guys that have the last uniform they put on was the Cub Scout uniform when they were 9, that are going through all the analytical information versus guys that played the game until they were nearly 40 and they've been around it their whole life. Those guys are going to butt heads just like the jocks and the nerds did when we were in high school.
Except this time the nerds might win. I will say this though.
Correct.
I think before we get out of here, Brian, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Without inappropriate sex with a homecoming queen and a moonwalk, will the nerds win that way?
Yeah. No.
That movie is problematic.
That movie will be rewatched today. I'm about to do a bunch of big comedy run. I'll let you know.
Yeah, watch it through your 2022 lens for a minute.
That's why I didn't like Bad News Bears. I couldn't turn off those lenses. Like, oh my God, the N-word's in this a lot. I do think that our co-host for Go Astros, Brian Arbor, had the tweet of the day about Phil Nevin getting the job, saying, haven't the Astros taught you anything? You always pick Derek Jeter over Phil Nevin. I thought that was funny. But the other thing too, is that the Angels, it's almost to Scott's point, and I think it almost dovetails from the news about the Angels lease being up at the Big A. The fact that their City Connect uniforms reflect the Pacific Ocean, and that thing's an hour away. Like I thought it was such a bizarre choice, and really shows you that they're a team without an identity. I feel like.
Well, I think it is interesting, and I wonder if you start seeing cost-cutting moves. I mean, if they truly aren't going to have a place to play, because there was evidently some mutual agreement between Artie Moreno and the city of Anaheim to both walk away from the lease. So is that to renegotiate the lease? Is that because Disney wants the land, which is what's being rumored? And does that mean Anaheim's looking for a new home? Do they move into Inland Empire? Do they move to Baker? I mean, where is there in California that's going to support another Major League Baseball team outside of Anaheim? The usual suspects, maybe Sacramento, but the usual suspects are pretty full up. So now you've got another candidate for being in a different market, possibly. And I think that causes problems with your player development and how you make decisions, because let's say Artie Moreno wants to sell the team, and that hasn't been discussed, but let's say that's where it's going to get to when you don't have a lease in place. It becomes a less attractive thing. You're not going to get the money you want for it. So one of the ways you make the franchise more valuable is to cut payroll down to the bone and then have a fresh start for somebody new. Shohei Ohtani is going to be a free agent in a couple of seasons. So what happens with that? Mike Trout isn't going to play forever, and he's in his 30s now, right? What happens with, there's just a lot of unknown with that whole franchise, and it's bizarre because they should have all the pieces in place from a market, from a location, from a stadium, all those things to be a contending team year over year, and they're just not.
Yeah. Scott, last word on that?
Maybe, if you've dealt with Disney for 30 years, going to Las Vegas isn't going to be that much of a change. You can handle the pressure. Maybe, as I listen to Andy, that's the thought I'm having over here. You never know what's happening behind the scenes, and you never know what the end game is at. The Dodgers have proven that, look, if you're willing to spend, you can have a championship team, and the Dodgers are virtually competing for the same fans as Anaheim, so to speak, right? Who's wearing the gear? The Angels, there's no way you're in the Angels front office and you don't have an eye on what the Dodgers are doing and go, why can't we do that?
And yet they can't even put their city name on the jersey, right? Like, don't all the jerseys say Angels?
Right, but I can't put Angeles, because then I'm really, Los Angeles. That's not us. That's them.
Yeah,
they were the California Angels for a long time. I don't. Historically, since Gene Mauch owned the team, the Angels have always been this. When they had Frank Tanana and Nolan Ryan in their freaking pitching rotation, you thought the Angels were going to be the studs. Always, they always have this great team that never gets to where it needs to get to. So this is kind of just another piece of history. Looking back to the 60s and 70s, is just doing it again. The Angels should be better than they are, and they're not.
Yeah. All right. I think it's a good place to wrap us up. And I think I'm excited. I think it was a great episode, and we're going to be doing some football stuff as we get closer. So I can't wait, guys. Have a great weekend, and, woo pig and Giga Aggies, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
My fingers can't do that together on one hand, but I can do it separate hands to help you out. How's that? But together they just won't go up.
You don't
together.
even have to. Don't even
crooked. Now, if I angle them down, it goes easy.
I'm actually going to end it on my Giga Aggies thing. Just I can't even.
It's a shame.